This is Cheryl Morgan at the Diana Wynne-Jones conference in Bristol, but actually I'm not going to talk about Diana at the moment because when I was at the London Book Fair earlier this year, I discovered that Liverpool University Press are bringing out a new novel by John Wyndham. I was rather excited by this, and I have with me Andy Sawyer of the University of Liverpool, and I hope Andy can tell us a little bit about the book. Could we start with the title and maybe a little bit about what it's about?
The title is Plan for Chaos, although there are two typescripts of it. One is called Plan for Chaos and the other is called Fury of Creation. And we think that the title changes were partly due to one was for the American market and one was for the British market. But essentially it's the same book. There's a few minor changes from one to reduce Americanization. So it was written at about the same time as the Day of the Triffids, so it's an early book. We thought at first it was earlier than Triffids, and discovered from various correspondences with Fred Pohl, who was his American agent at the time, that this wasn't the case. The typescripts exist in the John Wyndham archive, which were purchased by the University of Liverpool some time ago. And there's a number of unpublished works and short stories, novels, and Plan for Chaos / Fury of Creation was the one we decided to go for to try to get published, because it's a fascinating work in that an awful lot of Wyndham's themes and preoccupations seem foreshadowed in it.
So this was an early book he was writing then, and he was trying out a bunch of ideas that he used in later novels.
Essentially that's it, I think. He was trying to find a new voice for himself, I think. You see on the paperbacks of Wyndham's novels, the early Penguin paperbacks, this thing about when he came back to writing after World War II, he tried to form a modified form of what is unhappily called science fiction, is the expression, which I think basically means he wasn't satisfied with the kind of science fiction he was writing in the American magazines before the war. He was trying to see himself as very much of a novelist in the Wellesian tradition. He called what he was writing logical fantasy. And he also was concerned with trying to get what he was writing to as big an audience as possible, and this meant going for the middle-brow audience, going for an audience which is not necessarily the science fiction fan audience, writing in a way which was more, as it were, friendly to an audience which contained a high proportion of women, and so on and so forth.
So this then was an explicit rejection of the Gernsback philosophy of science fiction as a vehicle for teaching science?
I think it was. I think it was an affirmation, in a sense, of the way science fiction is sort of as a vehicle for discussing ideas, which may be, from some point of view, partly the same thing. But it was particularly, it was a rejection of the kind of space opera, action-packed, let's set a story on Mars and
more of a rejection of John Carter and
Doc Smith,
and right.
cowboys and Indians in space,
right.
and all that sort of stuff, which he didn't really have much time for.
Okay, so what actually happens in the book? Without obviously too many spoilers.
One of the things that he was trying to do, as I say, to bring in more of an audience, was to experiment with the tone of the book, and so it starts off very much as this kind of hard-boiled thriller, and the main character, Johnny Farthing, is an American. This is complicated. He is a British citizen from Scandinavian background who is living in America and wants to be American. So there's a lot of sort of business about trying to talk American and so on and so forth. He is a photojournalist who has discovered that a number of women have been killed recently. They look identical, which is strange. They are identical to his cousin Frida, who he is in love with, and that is extremely strange. And so he sets out to discover what exactly is going on. There are, and this is a slight spoiler perhaps, but I think it's probably necessary to know, there are Nazis and what we might call clones involved.
Right, yes, and this so many years before Boys from Brazil.
This is some years before Boys from Brazil, precisely, yes. And one of the reasons that it was not published was that the reports were coming back from the publishers, which went something like, nobody's interested in stories about Nazis and clones.
Right, yes, no, of course they wouldn't be. But hey, today they might be, and
yes.
That certainly sounds like a good thing. Now, one of the things that struck me when I discovered the book was that I believe it's selling at a fairly high price, well beyond the means of your average book buyer.
Yes, it's published by a small university press at a fairly, shall we say, specialist price. I'm hoping that it will have sold enough to warrant a paperback reprint. I'm told that it's selling quite well, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed here.
Okay, well, we can certainly hope for that, because I know there are an awful lot of people out there who've grown up reading John Wyndham novels and are big fans of his, and this sounds like a fascinating addition.
or addiction even, yes.
Right.
Once you start
and hey, Nazi clones, what more can you ask for?
What more can you want for, yes.
Okay.
And there are some interesting connections with the Day of the Triffids as well, which are probably safe to say no more, but...
Right, yes. Well, you've certainly got me interested in the book, so thank you very much for telling me all about it.
Thank you.